Purchasing air filters directly from the manufacturer definitely has its perks. Factory direct air filters doesn't just sell filters, but they manufacture the Aerostar air filter brand. So basically, you're cutting out the middleman. If you manage multiple properties or commercial service contracts, they do have bulk discounts, but they also offer wholesale pricing as well. They've got consistent inventory and standard sizes ship within 2 days. They also do unique sizes to spec, and that's within about 5 days. They have free shipping across the US. So if you guys want to get your filters faster and cheaper and built to spec, factorydirectfilters.com is the place to go. All right, guys, part three with myself and Matt. I'm sure that you've been learning some stuff in part one and part two. If you haven't, go back, listen to those, come back, join us for part three. But I think that this conversation, it's open, it's honest, it's actually very factual in a lot of ways of how to mitigate failure with install practices, good install practices. So this is part three with myself and Matt. Let's continue this conversation. This is the HVAC Know It All podcast. I'm your host, Gary McCready. This podcast is sponsored by Cool Air Products, Cintas, and SupplyHouse.com. Go to the show notes and click on the links to check these guys out. We covered those two things briefly, but as far as maintenance goes, right? Maintenance is a big one because some people put in machines and do nothing to them. And then when they break, they're like, oh, why does it cost me so much money? Because you didn't clean a coil. You didn't check your capacitors on your condenser fans to make sure they didn't fail, or you didn't check your contactors. A lot of this stuff can come back to poor maintenance or none at all. So how important is maintenance through the life of that system to maintain the compressor life?
It's absolutely critical. So if you've done your due diligence to install the equipment, as we've talked about earlier, and you've also done your due diligence to properly charge that system with the right amount of refrigerant, have dialed in, your superheat, subcooling, you've checked your compressor discharge temperature to make sure that that's not too hot. You've checked your compression ratio to make sure that's within specification. You've done your performance charting to make sure that the compressor is operating within its performance envelope. You've undertaken all of those steps to set it off for the best success.
You mentioned airflow earlier, and we
Yep.
should have said this before we got to maintenance, but the airflow setup on the initial startup commissioning, that's super important because if your airflow is not right, then your system's not going to perform right. Even if your system is charged correctly, even if you pulled the greatest vacuum in the world, even if you nitrogen braze, if your airflow is not right, you're still going to have issues with your system. So also check that too.
100%. You got to make
Yeah.
sure that, the evaporator coil that you're installing in the system, if you are installing an evaporator coil, residential application, that that's sized properly for the application, and that the blower in, say, the furnace is going to be moving enough CFM across that evaporator to properly boil off the.
Or not attempting to move too much because that's usually what
Correct.
happens. Yeah.
Yep. That you're moving the proper amount of air across that coil for it
Yeah.
to properly boil off the refrigerant and send superheated vapor back. That's critical. Making sure that on your outdoor unit that you don't have any, big obstructions preventing airflow around that condensing unit. So, things that I've seen out in the field and on social media where people install an outdoor unit, an outdoor condensing unit, and then all of a sudden build a surround around it that's basically like a brick wall, and you know, put a cap over top of it. Well, you're just going to contain all the heat that you're trying to reject from around that, and you're not going to have any airflow. So, people installing them under a deck, and you're going to trap a good chunk of heat underneath that, without proper airflow for that condensing unit to reject the heat in the refrigerant circuit away from it. It's going to maintain. It's going to be left in the circuit and eventually start causing wear and tear issues on the system.
Definitely. Yeah. So it's a good point that inside and outside, our airflow's got to be good. And usually, if you're installing a piece of equipment that's got a condenser fan in it, it's sized properly for that box that you're putting in. But not always the air handler is sized correctly with the tonnage of the system. That gets messed up quite often, I find, and the tonnage is too big sometimes too. But anyway, moral of the story: airflow on both indoor and outdoor. And if it's water cooled just means it takes the place of the air. There's water moving through something to reject heat or remove heat from the system or absorb it. So if it's water cooled, if it's fluid cooled, it's got pumps involved. That side of it's got to be commissioned properly and set up properly as well.
Yeah. For example, in fluid cooler, dry cooler applications, and making sure that you have the proper GPM of whatever fluid you're transporting through that as your heat absorption medium, whether that be glycol, typically a glycol mixture,
Mhm.
to make sure that that glycol is at the appropriate mixture percentage. Because if you don't have enough, or if you've increased the glycol percentage too high, that has impact on just how many BTUs can be absorbed by the mixture itself, and also has implications on the viscosity of that fluid and how that pump can transfer it through the system out to the dry cooler outside. So making that's another key maintenance point that people need to take a look at. It's again part of ABCs.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I just want to bring something up before I forget. It's a really good point to because you brought up something that I haven't even thought about in a while. So the glycol mixture, water's a better conductor of heat than glycol is. So you want to
Yeah.
get
So
as much water in the system as possible where it's not going to freeze. So you got to check. There's a man, what the it looks like a
a
kaleidoscope.
refractometer.
Refractometer, I forgot the name of that for a minute, thanks, Matt. So, I remember
Yeah,
years
no
and
worries.
years and years ago, there was an install done at a server room, and someone else it was our contract to do the maintenance, but someone else got this job to install a bunch of used equipment that came from somewhere else, and it was all glycol moving through the dry coolers on the roof. And part of our initial inspection of this was to check the freezing point with the refractometer, and we're in Canada, and it was minus 12 degrees Celsius was the freezing point, and we're like and this was the summer, we're like, "It's not gonna do, like, it's gonna freeze," and they didn't do nothing about it, and we had to come back midwinter. It's probably minus 20 outside degrees Celsius, and it was slush inside of the pipe. So it was going off on high head because we weren't moving any fluid through nothing, and it's because the mixture was not correct inside of those dry coolers moving through the system.
Yep, it's your mixture was starting to turn into a slushy. It was starting to freeze.
Yeah.
I don't recommend tasting it. It would be a little too sweet if it's
It is
propylene
sweet,
glycol.
yeah. It is pretty sweet, yeah.
Ethylene glycol is even worse. If you are working on a glycol system, one thing I would caution you on is make sure you're using the proper glycol for that application. Most systems these days are propylene glycol.
Yeah.
There are some out there that are ethylene glycol. If you mix the two together, that has further implications on the actual BTU absorption rate of the now mixture, science experiment mixture that you've made within that system as well.
Yeah, and you won't get a proper reading on the refractometer because they when you look through it,
No,
there's a propylene scale and an ethylene scale, and they're slightly
correct.
different from each other.
It's like what I can't go out and buy, 1234 YF and 32 and make my own 454B.
Yeah.
No,
Good luck
don't
if you try.
don't recommend it. Yeah, no, you'll never get the mixture proper. Just buy the proper refrigerant for the application. I was just gonna say, jokes aside, buy the proper refrigerant for the application. We're not the ones that are out there to make that mixture. We buy the proper refrigerant for the proper job.
Okay, so, I mean, we've gone here for about an hour, and we've touched on I mean, we didn't kinda just list things, we kinda jumbled them all around and had all these side conversations, and we came back to compressor mitigation, but it was a good conversation, like, but I think it's important that just to recap, like the nitrogen brazing, the proper vacuum, the proper charge, the proper airflow, the proper maintenance, just the proper sizing going back before the install, all this matters. And there's too many people in the industry that don't think it matters and they just it's like they lick their finger, put it in the air, okay. let's go. Let's run with this. And
One more
I mean,
important thing I wouldn't mind bringing up
sure,
in this
do it.
summary, Gary, would be on the maintenance side of things. If you are actually gauging up to the system, my recommendation would be if you are going to be doing that, use probes with minimal loss fittings. I see a lot of technicians still to date gauging up to systems.
You're gonna get hate comments because everybody loves their manifolds and their hoses.
If I could get a 20-foot hose, actually, I got a 100-foot charging hose. I'm going to use that to hook up to a system to my manifold. And then they don't put the refrigerant back in the system. So over repeated system checks where you're checking with a manifold with long hoses and not you can't put all that refrigerant back in that's going into your manifold, let alone are you purging that manifold to begin with the appropriate refrigerant?
I was gonna bring that up because it's a good point. There is a way that you can mitigate the loss of refrigerant by, you know what I mean, opening up your high side and letting that high side pressure push everything back into the low side of the system. But there's a caveat to that because of this. Either your hoses are empty and you gauge them up to a brand new system. So when you do that, you release that charge back into the system as much as you can. Because your hoses were empty, now that air and moisture that was in your hoses is going into the system. That's one.
100%.
Two, if you've already got refrigerant in your gauges from the last system you were on, then potentially that system could be contaminated. You could have moisture, acid. You know what I mean? It could be on its way out in a year or two, and there's all kinds of science experiments growing inside of that thing. And now you're going to put it onto this fresh system that no one's had gauges on, that's running perfectly fine. And now you're going to open up that high side and then close it and open up, let it all go back in to the system. But now it's contaminated refrigerant. So there's a caveat to that. But you said purge. So I guess you could purge your gauges and fill it up with brand new virgin refrigerant every time you gauged up. That would help.
It would help, but then you're still in the situation where, when you pull your manifold off of that system, are you just going to pull that manifold off or are you going to dump what you had in your manifold into the system? So now you're playing a bit of a dangerous game in that some techs will, you know, say they actually took the time and put virgin refrigerant into their manifold and hoses and they gauge up to the system. Well, what happens if they then dump what they had in their manifold and hoses into the system to purge out their hoses? Well, now you are going to be adding too much refrigerant into a system. It's typically the other way around where you're pulling refrigerant out, repeated maintenances, and then all of a sudden you have a system that just doesn't have enough charge. That's usually what you see. But in this example, it could go the opposite way.
Yeah. So be careful. And what Matt said is probably the best way is probes because you're not coming into the game with probes that are filled with contaminated refrigerant. And when you put your probe on, you're barely that sample of refrigerant you need is way less than a 6-foot hose. So you're mitigating the fact that you're stealing refrigerant from the machine.
If you even need to gauge up, there's a
Yeah,
lot of diagnostic testing that you can do with actually attaching probes to a system. You can do a lot of non-invasive system checks and tests that can give you a really good indication of what's going on in your system so that you don't necessarily have to connect probes and gauges to it.
cool. Thank you, Matt. I really appreciate it. And we'll do this again sooner than we've done it. Because it's been a couple years, I think, but we'll get this done sooner than a couple years next time.
I appreciate your time, and it's always a pleasure to come on and have a conversation with you, Gary. Looking forward to the next time, brother.